Hello, greetings from Portland, Oregon in the United States. I'm Susan Chan. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to participate in the 2020 Beethoven EPTA conference hosted by EPTA Germany. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for joining me at this presentation. The title of this presentation is Exoticism in Selected Piano Works of Beethoven, Haydn and Mozart, Editions and Transcriptions. We're going to look at several piano works. The first one is Beethoven's 6 variations on an original theme, Opus 76, Mozart's famous Turkish March from his Sonata in A major, Beethoven's Rondo Capriccio, Opus 129, and Haydn's Gypsy Rondo from his Piano Trio in G major. Turquerie was a major phenomenon in 16th to 18th century Europe. It refers to the admiration and imitation of Turkish art and culture, including fashion and music. The Ottoman Empire and Europe had a long history of conflict. The fall of Constantinople happened in 1453. The first siege happened in 1529, and the second siege happened in 1683. As a result, there were mixed reactions to Turkish culture. Composers expressed their personal and collective reactions in their music. Some explored the Turkish musical language and style and imitated and used these elements in their own music. They wanted to create something new, striking, and exciting in their musical language and musical works, with much drama and contrasts. They wanted to satisfy and please their patrons, concert presenters, and audiences. And they also wanted their music to ensure commercial success. Musicologist Nasser Al-Tayi wrote in his book, as a manifestation of Turquerie, the Alla-Turca as a musical topic was central to European pleasure, sensuality, and intimacy. Turkish military or janissary music is often characterized as loud, bombastic, militant, and masculine. It is very colorful, with many kinds of instruments being used, for example, woodwind instruments and percussion instruments, especially drums, cymbals, triangle, Turkish crescent, or the name Jingling Johnny. The music uses drone bass often, and in fact janissary pedals were installed in pianos of the time, or forte pianos, that can activate cymbals, bells, or drums to produce the effect of janissary music. Now let's hear an excerpt of janissary music. Mozart's opera Die Entführung aus dem Serail is a very powerful Singspiel, both musically and the messages that it carries. Seraglio refers to harem, or women's apartments in an Ottoman palace. Turkish music is used in the overture and ending of the opera. Nasser Al-Tayi wrote in his book, Entführung is a reflection of 18th century Viennese moral and musical conflicts with the Turkish Empire. In the story, Osman, this character here, this gentleman, is Turkish and is the overseer of the Pasha, or the high-ranking Turkish officer. He represents danger, violence, and threat. And Belmonte, the other gentleman, is a Western European Christian hero. Many nasty things happened in the story. For example, Osman sings of the triumph when the Western European people die on the gallows. However, the opera has a happy ending. The Pasha sets the captives free. There is a sense of forgiveness, generosity, and kindness. Now let's watch a clip, an excerpt of a clip of the opera. Let's move on to another excerpt here where the conflict happens between the two gentlemen. So Mozart's Rondo alla Turca, or the Turkish March from Sonata in A, is well known. There are Turkish effects in the music, and these include use of 2/4 meter, use of allegretto marking, use of simple harmonies, mainly or very often tonic and dominant harmonies. The piece also uses parallel and relative keys, and the effects of drums are expressed in the rolled chords in the left hand. It's a very rhythmic piece with lots of 16th note passage work. Various pianists have transcribed the Turkish March into virtuosic encore pieces, and those are really fun and entertaining. And these pianists include Wang or Yuja Wang, Volodos, and the piano duo Anderson and Rowe. Now I'd like to play the first two sections of the Turkish March. Haydn, in his Symphony No. 100, nicknamed the Military, from 1793, uses Turkish elements in the second and fourth movements. It actually depicts the Second Siege in 1683 with a trumpet solo and drum roll. It uses Turkish instruments brought into the orchestra, including cymbals, bass drum, triangle, Turkish crescent, and jingling Johnny. We can find a piano transcription available on IMSLP, and it's believed that Haydn himself actually made the transcription. So let's take a look at Beethoven's 6 variations on an original theme, Opus 76 from 1808. It's from his middle period. The theme is a Turkish march. It's marked Allegro risoluto. We can hear the march quality with emphasized beats marked with sforzandi. A drone bass is often used with the repeated note of the D tonic note. Simple harmony is used. Often it's dominant 7th and tonic chords. The relative key of B minor is used in the second half of the theme. Variations 1 to 5 are delightful, sweet, and humorous. And then Turkish materials return in variation 6 with a brilliant ending. This theme has been very popular and transcribed by other people in their pieces. And Beethoven actually used the theme in his incidental music to the play Ruins of Athens. The fourth movement is called Turkish March and uses the Turkish instruments. Now I'd like to play the theme of Opus 76. In Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Turkish march is used in the finale. There, the Ode to Joy is transformed into a Turkish march. Nasser Al-Tayi powerfully wrote the following in his book. Janissary music is called upon to depict triumph and as a symbol for unity and brotherhood. Here, Beethoven's message to all of humanity is the arrival at a unified universe. And Beethoven embraces the musical vocabularies of a traditional enemy in creating an emblem of joyous harmony. Let's listen to an excerpt of it. Now let's turn to Hungarian gypsy music. In the classical period, Hungarian gypsy music was very popular and generated much commercial success. Hundreds of westernized Hungarian gypsy dances were issued by Viennese music publishers. Much of the sheet music was used domestically by people playing the music at home. Haydn, as we know, worked for the Hungarian Esterházy family. He very likely heard music played by gypsy ensembles in Vienna, his native eastern Austria, and on the Esterházy estate. At the time, Beethoven was studying with Haydn and went with Haydn to Esterházy, visited other Hungarian cities, and so on. He very much enjoyed hearing performances of great gypsy musicians. Some musicologists have discussed the ideas of annexation and domestication of Hungarian music by Western European composers. So in Hungarian gypsy music, there is very often virtuosic and improvisatory solo fiddle playing, as we'll hear in a minute. The music often uses drone bass, syncopation, ornaments such as appoggiaturas and lower neighbor notes, and special cadential patterns such as the boccazo or the heel-kicking figuration. There are also special melodic figurations such as short figures within beats, and also the use of the augmented second interval. There's also rhythmic figurations such as the anapest. So let's hear an excerpt of Monti's Csárdás, which means Hungarian folk dance here, played on the violin with a band, including a cymbalum, a traditional Hungarian gypsy instrument. Haydn used gypsy elements in some of his piano works, for example, the short, easy dances that students often play, and also in the finale of his piano concerto in D, written in 1784. In 1795 to 6, that period, he wrote the piano trio in G for piano, violin, and cello, and the finale of the last movement is a rondo, and originally was published with the name Rondo in the Gypsies style. And later, in the later editions, it was published as Rondo al Ungherese. So it seems that the words gypsies and Hungarian style were interchangeable. Musicologist Matthew Head said that this gypsy trio is Haydn's best-known essay in exoticism. In the refrain, we have a style like a Western and contradance, and with exotic episodes. So the themes in this trio are similar to dances from an old collection of gypsy melodies from 1806 called 22 Original Hungarian National Dances. Piano transcriptions of the trio were done by Köhler and is available on IMSLP and also believed to be by Haydn as well, edited by Morris Hinson and published by Alfred in the USA. Now I'd like to play some excerpts from the piece, the refrain, which is more Western, contradance style, and the two exotic episodes. The second episode. So let's take a look at Beethoven's Rondo Capriccio, Opus 129. It was actually written in 1795 to 8, which is early period. So there is some interesting story behind that. The caption title of the piece is Alla Ungherese, quasi un capriccio. Excuse my pronunciation. That means in Hungarian gypsy style, like a caprice. It was actually incomplete and unpublished during Beethoven's lifetime. It is an early work despite the late opus number, as I mentioned. It is delightful and full of good humor, vitality, and youthful exuberance. It is also an exercise in his early period in expansion of the rondo form and extensive use of motives throughout the piece. Schumann was very amused by the music, he said. I laughed heartily over it the other day. On the other hand, Liszt thought that Beethoven misunderstood the Hungarian gypsy characteristics essentially inherent in its form. There are various transcriptions for orchestra and other instruments of the piece. So in February of this year, I had the wonderful opportunity to visit the Morgan Library and Museum in New York City. They were having an exhibition called Beethoven 250, autographed music manuscripts by Ludwig van Beethoven. A page from the manuscript of this piece was on display among several other works. I was very fortunate to gain permission to the manuscript itself. It was a truly humbling, touching, and unforgettable experience to touch the same paper that Beethoven handled and wrote on. The score, as you can see, is fairly legible compared with manuscripts of his other works. There are some incomplete and blank measures or bars here. There are also some confusing chords and running passages. You can see here in Beethoven's own handwriting. I wrote it down a little bit more clearly for you to see. That's what it says. And along with the manuscript is a page of sketches. The titles here are interesting because this title is obviously not in Beethoven's hand. It's actually believed to be in Schindler's hand. And it says, "The Rage Over the Lost Penny Vented in a Caprice." And here it's believed to be written in Beethoven's hand, but at a later time in his life, because the handwriting is different from the first period. And he wrote leichter Caprice, or easy or little caprice. The sketches are related to the finale of Symphony No. 1 and the first movement of Piano Concerto No. 1. So this is clear evidence that the piece was written at the same time as these early works from the first period. Diabelli bought the manuscript of this work together with several of Beethoven's other works at an auction in November of 1827, shortly after the composer's death. In a likely scenario, he subsequently had Schindler put in the title "The Rage Over the Lost Penny Vented in the Caprice" on the page of sketches that we just saw, and had somebody, possibly himself or Czerny, who was Beethoven's student, fill in the blank measures to complete the piece. The score was then copied, with some mistakes included, and edited with various additional expression markings. He then included the untruthful information in the footnote on the first page of the score here, that Beethoven had completed the piece with the title "The Rage Over the Lost Penny Vented in a Caprice," and then published it in Vienna in 1828 with the title "RONDO a CAPRICCIO." Many subsequent editions by others, including Hans von Bülow, are based on Diabelli's first edition rather than on Beethoven's manuscript of the piece, and we can find these editions on IMS-LP. So this is the title page of Diabelli's edition with the title "Rondo a Capriccio." Here's the first page of the music edited by Hans von Bülow in 1892. It is based on Diabelli's edition from 1828. Von Bülow called this piece a truly classic humoresque by Beethoven. He also mistakenly thought that the piece was from Beethoven's third period. A prominent feature of the editing is using vivid imagery and providing practical tips on how to bring out the expression, including dramatic character of the music. Being a teaching and performing edition, this could be very helpful for students, teachers, and performers alike. You can see there's lots of annotations to the music. And this is the first page of the Händler edition from 1976. It's an invaluable edition based on Beethoven's autograph discovered in the US in 1945 rather than the original edition published by Diabelli in 1828. The concise and helpful preface provides enlightening historical information on the manuscript as well as helpful editorial notes. It clarifies some uncertainties in Beethoven's manuscript and points out some errors in the Diabelli edition. Some passages are made more playable than in other editions, especially for pianists with smaller hands, so that could be very helpful. The Henley edition attempts to clarify some confusion in the manuscript. but what it says does not seem entirely accurate. So here I've extracted the first systems of the score from the manuscript of Beethoven and the 3 editions for easy comparison. So in short, Beethoven's version is very bare, basically just notes with indications for repetitions and chords. And Diabelli's edition has the title, tempo indication, dynamics, slurs, accents, and so on. The Hans von Bülow edition has tempo marking, fingering, and more expression markings. And the Henley edition from 1976 is very clean overall and is based on Beethoven's manuscript, as we can see here, with some fingering and dynamics put in. Now I'd like to play the first couple of sections from the Rondo Capriccio. Here I'm using Hans von Bülow's edition, and he actually left out a few measures, so I repeated those few measures based on Beethoven's manuscript. So there was a little bit of confusion there at that point. So let's move on. In this project, I used several very useful resources on the topic. Nasser Al-Tayi's book is called Representations of the Orient in Western Music, Violence and Sensuality, published in 2010. To me, it's sincerely and beautifully written. It's from the perspectives of an Arab musicologist. And the second one is Erich Herzmann's The Newly Discovered Autograph of Beethoven's Rondo a Capriccio, Opus 129. The article was published in 1946. It is an intriguing and in-depth discussion on the topic, and it reads almost like a detective story. And a third one is Catherine May's Reconsidering an Early Exoticism, Viennese Adaptations of Hungarian Gypsy Music around 1800. It's an article published in 2009. I found it fascinating, and it's a thorough discussion of the subject. There are, of course, many other books and articles on the topic as well. I would like to acknowledge the Morgan Library and Museum in New York City, especially Dr. Robinson McClellan, who is the Assistant Curator of Manuscripts and Printed Music. He provided a lot of great help and locating the images and sending them to me for my research. So in summary, these exotic elements, the Turkish elements as well as the Hungarian gypsy elements, add thrill, excitement and drama to the music. It also sparks extensive research in exoticism and otherness or alterity in music. The blend of Western and exotic elements within works expresses striking contrasts and inclusiveness. Beethoven's Ode to Joy powerfully and beautifully expresses his belief in universal love and brotherhood as in an ideal world. Liszt transcribed all Beethoven's 9 symphonies for the piano. And of course that includes the Ode to Joy section from the 9th Symphony. Now, to conclude, I'd like to play an excerpt of that. Thank you very much.